Beautiful. Good morning and welcome to Braveheart Conversations. I am Jillian Aurora. This is my beautiful co-host Marie Wallace.
Hi, guys.
Good morning. And today we're going to be talking about co-parenting with an abusive partner. And this, I feel like, is a very relevant topic because in the work that we do, we work with a lot of women who have left relationships. So kind of post leaving, there are some significant barriers, some struggles that we want to address, and co-parenting can be a difficult challenge because now, even if you've left this abusive person, you're still stuck with them on some degree for the remainder of the 18 years you have with your children. So, we want to address how do you do that? And there aren't any easy answers, and there aren't any right answers, correct ways to do things. But I do think we can have a few tips and guidelines and things that can be helpful in navigating that situation. And I think we have some good experience and wisdom to share. As a mediator, I work through a lot of those co-parenting issues. More on that very objective, how are we going to put this into an agreement kind of a basis. And then I think, Marie, you can share from more of an experiential basis as well, how to navigate through co-parenting. So let's dive in. Marie, what have been some of the keys for you as your children are now grown? So you've successfully navigated this throughout. But what were some of the biggest challenges that came up for you when you did leave a toxic partner and then had to figure out how to parent with this person?
Well, that's a big one to open up. I think honoring the other person is always, I think, first and foremost, whomever you're partnering with, is keeping whatever your past was out of partnering with them on the issues with the children is probably, for me, one of the things, because it focuses on the now and what are we going to do to be the best parents we can be for the children. And part of that is owning my decisions, being the best parent I can be in that situation, and so that my kids can see me as an example, not as someone who is wishy-washy about a decision, someone who really thought through things and in planning. So back to my planning piece is just always planning situations, how they're going to happen, think through things. We'll probably have to go through some things before, because right now I'm not keyed up for that, but mostly it's just being very honoring of each other, and it's about the kids, not about us or our relationship. It's really about what's best for them. It would be where I would focus. So yeah, you can.
So some of the challenges that I see come up, especially in mediation, are I'll hear a lot of mothers say, well, what's best is for them to be with me 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And legally, that's generally not an option. And we have to figure out a way to still have equal time or partial time or however that looks with this other parent. And so there's two elements that I see as really important. One is the safety of yourself,
Sure.
right? That's really it is very vital, very important. And then the safety of the children as well. And they're two different categories, because sometimes the abuser is really only targeting you. Not that they're creating a healthy situation for the children either, because you can't be a healthy parent without being a healthy individual.
Sure.
You can't be a healthy partner without being a healthy individual. Everything stems from the health of ourselves as an individual. So all we can really have power over is myself.
Yep.
So as a mother, then we get to take responsibility for our own health and modeling healthy boundaries, healthy
Mm-hmm.
communication, all of those pieces. But we have no guarantee that that partner is going to respond in the same way. That is why we left, right? Because you don't have control of the other person's behavior, which is harmful or abusive in some
Mm-hmm.
way. So, um, talking about the safety of yourself in the co-parenting relationship, some of the things that really clean that relationship up and give you some safety are things like coordinating drop-offs that aren't you don't have to be present. So it could be
Right.
at school exchanges, any way that you can be no contact or
Or
very limited,
neutral, like a neutral place that there are people and
where you're not doing pickups and drop-offs at the house,
right.
or you have a third party present, or um, you can have situations set up where your communication is limited to, I write agreements all the time where if one person feels unsafe, we can make sure communication will only go through email, or
Mm-hmm.
will only go through a parenting app, or some way that you're not opening the door nearly as wide for abuse to take
Or
place.
maybe even that the conversations between us are only about the kids.
Yep.
Some of those kinds of things. There's lots of little tidbits along the way. Just making sure that it's about the kids.
And one thing I always will tell parties that I'm mediating with is, just because it's in the agreement doesn't mean that the other person's going to follow it.
True.
And although, I can do the best I can, or any other mediator or attorney can do the best they can to create an agreement that is enforceable, meaning, it's measurable things that people can say you are objectively or are not doing this, it still is something that um, they could break all those things, and you still have to, take them back to court, or,
Mm-hmm.
do whatever you need to do to enforce it. So that's a reality check for a lot of people who are in the middle of divorcing or coming up with these agreements, is that there aren't any guarantees, which sometimes will create this fear reaction where, well, I'm just going to take the kids as much as I can then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, talking about the safety of the children, the next piece, um, I know that that is really difficult when you see the safety of your children as, well, they just need to be with me 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And legally, sometimes that's an option. If you're dealing with like a drug abuser, you're dealing with someone who has criminal offenses, or you have some leg to stand on,
Mm-hmm.
then you might get, more custody. But in a lot of cases, you don't. In a lot of
Mm-hmm.
cases, parents have equal rights to have time with their children. And so finding the positives in that is a challenge. But I think that it is really important. It's easy, so easy to get lost in this. They're a narcissist, they're an abuser, they're a bad
Mm-hmm.
person, and therefore, they it colors everything that we say about that other parent.
It also creates this if we're always holding the other parent back, it creates this illusion that there's something about them that they need to. I let me see. Think of what I want to say. Something about them that they've got to know, and in reality, that other parent is a part of them, and it
Mm-hmm.
is a part of their inheritance as a child, and it's only one small piece of that other person. And just because we have difficulty in our relationship doesn't mean that it's going to be the same in that
Right.
relationship. And the kids get to see, the good things, and because there's good in all of us, and really honorable things in each of us,
Mm-hmm.
that they get to cherish about themselves, because that is part of their history and DNA. And holding them back, and 100% of the time, doesn't allow the kids to formulate their own opinions about the other person, and they're only seeing one side of the story, which is anyway, that's kind of where I wanted to go with that a little bit.
Well, I want to talk about like neutralizing the the feelings towards the abuser, or the
Right.
demonization of the abuser. So what I see collectively even today, like I see this mirrored a lot, is we are quick to label whatever that abuser is, the narcissist, they're a terrible person, and then we are perpetuating that cycle. We are actually solidifying that identity for them,
Mm-hmm.
and creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's
They
one
can never break out of it. Yeah.
piece, yeah. And the other piece is that I see over and over repeated in history is that when we categorize that side or that person as bad or wrong, we actually become the very behavior that we hate. So,
We become the abuser in that situation.
right, right. So we actually, when we dehumanize them, because that's really what we're doing, is when we make someone bad and wrong, and we hate them essentially, we dehumanize them, and then we justify their mistreatment. This happens over and over and over, and it's like a broken record we really need to put a stop to. But when we're capable of not giving attention and energy to the behaviors that we're seeing that are out of our control, and I'm
Sure.
not at all advocating that we don't step in if there is actual abuse happening towards children, but I'm talking about behavior versus person. I'm talking about, I see this behavior happening that needs legal intervention versus this person is just a terrible, rotten person that should never have my children. They're two very, very different motives, two very different beliefs, two different agendas. So, in the one case where you're saying this is just a bad person, if we can neutralize that and not give attention and energy to this person being a bad person, your children will already see, based on your behavior, if you're setting healthy boundaries, if you are communicating in very concise and simple ways that are objective and not loaded with emotion, they will see that. They will actually have a really powerful experience seeing your behavior, seeing your reaction that is really kind of a non-reaction.
Exactly.
And they'll pick up on that modeling. They will start to pick up on that behavior, and they will respect and admire you for that. If they can't today, it will eventually they'll eventually be able to see that in a different light. And
I promise you, I'm on the other side of that. And oftentimes they don't see it right away.
Yep.
Oftentimes they feel it gets in that us and them if you're not careful. So that's what my number one rule. I never say anything derogatory or negative about another person in that situation. I'm not perfect, just so you know that, but for the most part, I leave them out of it. It does keep that emotional charge out of things, and it just becomes more like a transaction, almost business like. This is how we co-parent. This is our rules and boundaries around this, and then you don't get involved in those clashes. Doesn't mean you don't have to have those tough conversations, because that's part of parenting anyway, but you neutralize it. And I really like when I hold that other person in a high esteem, then my kids can see the good parts.
Yep.
And my kids can see like it, they had nothing to do with it, right? They had no, they their innocence can stay intact, and they can still love and cherish all the parts about both of us. And it is something they can physically see and feel, how I'm honoring that other person in this relationship, and that models really good behavior for them, and it changes the cycle. That cycle of abuse doesn't keep showing up.
Yeah, and
it doesn't demonize them.
there's
Not sure what that was.
I'm not sure either. Something fell. there's a huge level of mastery that we're called to when we have chosen into these relationships with abusers, and then gotten out of them, and then we have to continue communicating with them. There's a that's a big ask. That's
Mm-hmm.
a really
It's a
big
really big ask.
ask. And so learning how to deal with really inflammatory, because often abusers are doing what? They're like,
Mm-hmm.
poking at you,
They know all the
trying to get
buttons.
the reaction to where you're finally like, stop. Um, and you react negatively. And so
Mm-hmm.
learning how to, when we're not in a relationship, we have the ability to protect ourselves in a much different way. So generally, okay, I'm in my own home, so I have a retreat, right? Whereas in the past, there was no retreat. There was no
Mm-hmm.
way to escape. You were stuck in that house with them. Um, but now the situation may be a little bit different, where we have the ability to say, no, you may not come on my property. No, you may not contact me by phone. You're blocked. You may not say these certain things, otherwise these consequences will happen. So the boundaries,
And
there's
follow through with those.
but there's much more ability to have your own protection that we
Mm-hmm.
didn't have before,
Right.
right? Um, so keeping those things really clean is imperative to not opening the door for abuse. And your children will see that, and your children will pick up on, okay, this is how to have healthy boundaries, and
Mm-hmm.
they will eventually learn how to set those boundaries on their own as well. Again, every situation is very different. Every person with abusive patterns is very different. So, I am not saying that in some cases you shouldn't intervene, because sometimes abusers do direct their abusiveness
Towards
towards
the children.
a
Yeah.
child. And of course, I'm not advocating for not stepping in and intervening in that position. However, I do think that we get to model these clean boundaries, and we get to also learn and master how to be very concise. So I want to give a few details, because I
Okay.
think that's really helpful. So let's see. If I want to pick something that's a generally inflammatory thing. I want to change the time I pick up the kids, right? And maybe we already have a set agreement, and I'm going to take the abusive side here.
Okay.
And so I just want to, change the situation. I just want to change the pickup, even though I know you've got a class or something, or you've got work to be at 6 o'clock, and I'm gonna say, well, I need to pick up the kids at 6:15, and that's gonna totally change your plans, right? So what is your response to me then?
No.
Right. So, but what's the temptation to respond? The temptation is to say what?
It's to blow up and to say,
You
no,
know.
I have this thing, and you're just trying, and accusing and blaming and doing all kinds of exploding on them.
Right. Which a concise um, response would be what?
No.
No. The agreed on time is
They
five
agreed on,
o'clock or
yeah,
whatever.
5 o'clock or whatever it is. Yeah.
And
And no is a perfectly good answer. I
yep.
think that's sometimes we think we have to give an explanation. No, we agreed on.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't pick up the kids, then you forfeit your visit or whatever, or
I'll make arrangements.
this is where hopefully, if you had a good mediator or a good attorney, you hopefully will have something to
in writing, because that's
yeah.
really helpful.
Yep. Um, but yeah, we don't have to give all of the, you're such an asshole because I need to be at work. And, that's where a lot of us go, right?
Well, it perpetuates that aggression, and it feeds into more abuse, because now we have been the ones that have emotionally
Right.
thrown a charge into it.
Yeah. And let's say another one. Okay, so our agreement is that we're only talking about the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's say I go, well, I see your child support went down. You must have been demoted, or you can't even keep a job for a whole year.
I usually just walk away at that point.
Right. But what is the
The
temptation?
temptation is to engage, right? Because they know our buttons. They know the buttons to push, and yeah, just and defaming character is really,
Totally.
that one's a tough
I
one.
see you've put on a couple of pounds. You must,
Hmm.
or
I
oh,
see you're in school and you're never gonna finish.
it's all of those things
Yeah.
that you will come up against, right? This is the
Hmm.
old patterns. And what has the pattern been in the past is what? We've taught them we will do what?
We will engage with that and we'll keep on
Right.
fighting with them. Yeah.
Right. And that actually sets up a stage with the kids that we're showing them that we are going to get pulled into that, and they're learning how to get pulled into all of these behaviors and things. So, those sorts of things I learned. Where I can, I close up all of the channels of
Loopholes.
communication where abuse is seeping in. No, it's not okay to talk to me like that. You're blocked.
Mm-hmm.
You are only allowed to communicate with me in this particular way. Maybe it's having a third party on our email that reviews
Mm-hmm.
everything that's seen. Maybe it's only communicating through an attorney. Maybe it's only communicating through a trusted friend. But I can set parameters where that is, you're not allowed to access me in that way. Or no response. There are plenty of things that, like, that doesn't have to do with the kids. I'm just not responding.
Yeah.
So, learning how to be really simple and concise is one of the most powerful things I think I've ever learned in learning how to deal with an abuser. Also, in Al Anon, I can remember a list of neutral responses that were really
Mm-hmm.
helpful. Like, okay, that's interesting. Wow. Uh, you might be right. Just lots of
Mm-hmm.
things that were just, I'm not picking up the rope, I'm not taking the bait.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's hugely helpful in someone who is trying to provoke.
And I would say I want to take it a step further because these are also responses to someone that you could be emotionally charged by in other relationships, in office relationships, or the one family member that tends to trigger you. We all have, one or two in our family that know that button to push. It's being neutral, and even if you do care, you don't show that.
Mm-hmm.
It's but you have to really know yourself. I would take some time to really get to know yourself, really get to know what charges you, and maybe it's a journal exercise where you sit down and go, I know that these things are things that will provoke me and charge me, and here's like a if this happens, and then it's kind of being emotionally prepared. I call it scripts, sitting down and writing the scripts that maybe normally come up between you two,
Yeah.
so that, and in each relationship's going to be different. Like the time might trigger one person and the name calling might trigger another person. What are some things that you get emotionally charged by, and how do you neutralize that? So education is huge.
Yeah.
Finding support system is huge. When you know that you might be vulnerable in a certain situation, maybe practice with someone and say, hey, could you practice this role play with me so that I know how to learn not to react. Normally this would charge me, and I need you to push my buttons as much as you can, because it's kind of fun, because then you go, oh, now I know how to react. And you might have to do it a few times, because at first it feels like,
Mm-hmm.
you are pretending, but it also goes, oh, I forgot that word really makes me, or that situation really, I don't know. I just think being prepared as much as possible. Education is huge. Finding support,
Knowing your
huge.
triggers.
Knowing your triggers.
And I'm a huge advocate of, in every situation that you can, like, you are not entitled to a relationship with me. And if
That's
you're
huge.
abusive, then, like, I will limit as much contact as I can. I also understand in this particular conversation we're having, we're talking about co-parenting. So going completely no contact isn't an
Yeah,
option.
it's
In co-parenting, you have to keep a channel of communication open. And so, this discussion is more about that creativity of knowing what your triggers are, knowing what your general response is going to be, keeping it really simple and concise. Like, those are the sorts of skills that we're talking about in these, like, have to have communication
and
situations.
holding that boundary. It's really difficult sometimes. There is a temptation, and we are moody creatures, so one day it may not bother me and another day it might, but just knowing.
Yeah. So our question we have here is, what is your advice for dealing with the other parent talking badly about you, specifically lying about you, when you have made a conscious effort not to talk to the kids about the other parent? I feel compelled to defend myself when I hear what they have been told. Totally. This happens a lot. So I want to clarify, there's two different situations. One is the other parent is talking about you to other people. And then the other parent is talking about you to the kids. And so both of those situations can certainly be the case. And I remember one of the cases I had, this was happening a lot. There was a lot of defamation and talking badly about the other parent to friends and mutual contacts they had, and it was causing this big rift and drama. So I've had that happen to me before.
More than once, yeah.
Yeah. So again, I see this behavior as more of that, like, trying to get a reaction, and really just provoking, because they know it works. They know you will get up in arms and you'll get defensive and you'll post this long thing on Facebook about how everything was wrong that was said about you. My personal belief in that situation is, I experienced this, and I had a huge wave of Facebook friends and people that left my life because they chose to believe whatever the rumors were. And so my personal belief is just letting it be, and the people who really know and love me will love me enough to come clarify, or they will just trust in my character enough to dismiss it. So dealing with other people, that would be my response. Marie, do you have something to add to that?
I was going to say that there's really nothing we can do about the other side, because that happens everywhere in real life. And exactly what you said is that, the people who really know me, know my character, and if they have a question and they really honor and cherish our relationship, then they will come ask me, and it's a conversation. And as far as with the children, there's nothing I can do. And I've had that happen where the other party was talking bad about me, and it's just sitting down and talking with the children and clarifying with them. You don't really have to defend yourself, and even talking in a way that says, the other party is hurt right now. And that's the truth of it. The reason that they're doing some of that is they still feel this hurt and this pain, and they want to cause more pain. And you just throw a lot of love on it.
Yeah, I think for me, if it was children that they've been told something about me, my response in that situation would be to continually affirm to the children that it's safe to talk to me and to ask me questions about, because they often are conflicted, and
they feel they're part of it too, that for some reason we're split because of them. So constant reassurance to them.
Yeah, and to just say, if you hear something bad about me, please come and talk to me about it. And then it is more about their curiosity and they're approaching you instead of you, defending yourself. They get to come to you and say, I'm so confused because daddy's saying this or mommy's saying that.
Or the step parent is saying something.
Right.
Because that's happened before.
Lots of times, yeah. And so
it's always a conversation away.
And trusting too, again, that kids see character, kids see behavior far more than they see words. And it's so much more meaningful. So if they're watching you be loving and they're watching your behavior, it's going to show for itself. It doesn't even need defense. It doesn't need an explanation. And they will continue to see that as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
So, um,
And sometimes you have to point that out, that you're having conversations. Recently, we had a situation with our a misunderstanding with our grandkids, and we said, see, this is what adults do. Or it wasn't with our grandkids, but it was outside, and the grandkids were a witness. And so we said, this is how you have a healthy conversation. It's uncomfortable for all of us, right? It's uncomfortable, but they got to witness how to have that healthy conversation. So point those things out when you are having a good conversation with someone that is uncomfortable, and you can see everybody squirming, even, even the kids, they're squirming, but then they go, oh, instead of letting it fester and get ugly and,
yeah.
nasty, because it only promotes that abuse further.
And do remember that your abusive ex partner knows intuitively that the children can be used as pawns to get that further provocation. So if that's what they're going
Especially
for,
if this isn't working.
yeah, so they're going to amp it up, right? They're going to keep trying to get to you in other ways, and the kids are a fantastic opportunity. So again, when somebody's doing this to you and you don't respond, that's really the best way to make it stop. It's the same with the kids. If you keep responding and you keep defending yourself, they're going to go, oh, that worked, and they're going to keep doing it more. So wherever,
that's where the questions are lying today.
Okay,
so.
yeah. My kids are acting miserable towards me. My husband is gaslighting and boasting himself up that I don't even matter. Um, yeah, so again, I really do think that your kids expect your kids to be used as pawns in situations where you're dealing with an abuser. They're not happy that they haven't gotten their way, and they're not happy that they haven't gotten to you, and so your kids are
it's truly a painful place to be, but you have to know yourself and know that those things aren't true. It's just a way to manipulate the situation and try to get a response. So it's going back to the integrity of you and knowing your true actions in this matter, and how you hold yourself and honor yourself in this situation is what's going to let the kids see, you know what, there's some incongruency here. Dad is saying this, but look at how mom's reacting, and your actions will speak louder than words in that moment, more so than anything that you say. Is just throw lots of love on those. It's hard, it's super painful, and it's not easy. But on the other side, your kids get to see that you didn't trash that other person, because of the pain that you're feeling. Because all that is perpetuating the cycle. One hurt person's hurting another person, and then I respond with hurt, and they respond with hurt, and then it just keeps that cycle going. So for that cycle to stop, I get to love on myself, and that's where you might need a third party to to vent with, and not your children. Get that support to say, this is really painful. So maybe getting another person in there that you can chat with.
And your kids might take the bait sometimes, and that's what's really hard. Is sometimes your kids
don't know.
Parrot the abuser. They will parrot what they're hearing, and sometimes it's ugly. And so, just as a reminder, your kids are not a source for your self-worth. And so finding that other source, finding someone else who, it's perfectly valid to need someone that is a cheerleader, that is a sounding board, that is accountability. It's really important to find those things
outside of your kids.
They're not your kids, and your kids may get ugly, because your kids may take the bait sometimes, and they may buy into the lies for a while, and the most powerful thing really is not to respond, not to react.
Your character will show through.
Yep.
It shines through.
Yep.
It's just not it's a long-term response.
Yep.
It's not a quick, easy fix.
I don't get the opportunity to talk to my kids much. My husband is always with them when I try to communicate. That is also really hard. I don't know, Samantha, specifically what your situation is, or if you're in the middle of finding a custody agreement. Um, I think there's a lot of healing that gets to take place once you can find that safe place, that safe separation. And that's what we were talking about earlier, is that when you're in the midst of that relationship, there isn't the ability to have that safe space. And so everything is very tainted by the dependency on, you're in the same house together, and you're not able to have any freedom or space or independence. So I'm hoping that, Samantha, eventually you will get to a place where you are able to communicate with your kids separately, because that is a really difficult place. And knowing, if that is a really toxic partnership, then being able to accept reality that when you're in the midst of a relationship that is really at the mercy of that person, not to have expectations that it's going to be something different. Sick people don't act well. They just don't act well. So
they didn't go through court.
Don't expect them to act well. We didn't go through the courts. So I don't know.
You might have an opportunity to bring it up now.
Yeah, I don't know if your plan is to go to the courts or if that is still in the works.
And province is apart. That's even harder.
Yeah, it's a toxic relationship disguised as kindness. And that is definitely an abusive tactic as well, is that a lot of the abusers that we've had, a lot of the relationships that we've had, they're not monsters. Mm-hmm. They have their elements of kindness, and they do present to the public well, and they have, careers, and they're normal people on many levels, and we're all in the process of letting go of toxic programming in many, many regards. And some people are they haven't done much of that yet. And so it's not that they're terrible people, but the best that they can do is still really hurtful. Mm-hmm. So, Samantha, I'm not sure where you're at in resolving that conflict. I do absolutely advocate for going through the legal system to advocate for your rights as a parent to have custody, shared custody with your children. And so, again, I'm not sure the specifics of your situation, but if you haven't gone through that process yet, then it's definitely something that some of us feel like we feel guilty for fighting with the ex-partner and advocating for our rightful entitlement of our children, and that's definitely nothing to feel guilty about. So if you're struggling with the idea of advocating for yourself in in court and fighting to have your kids, like it's something that your kids desperately need. They desperately need both parents at any extent that it's possible. Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Hi, Abby. I love that you're here. Such a supportive sister. I love you so much. Okay. We are...
That was a tough topic, but we're still open to questions and concerns that...
Yeah. I know we're at the time. I just want to make sure that we cover questions. It's not guilt. It's I don't think fighting helps. Yeah. Samantha, it's hard for me to... tackle your questions because I wish I knew more. I wish I knew more of your situation. But fighting sometimes, unfortunately, there are some situations that the legal system doesn't back you up. And I really, really am an advocate of having our legal system, what's the word I'm looking for, improved to where it's more fair for families to get through the system, and having some checks and balances in place for usually women, not always women, but usually women who are at a disadvantage because they're dealing with someone who's not a fair fighter, they're not a fair player.
May have more resources too. So.
There's a lot of different dynamics there, but I hope that we keep improving the court system. And sometimes fighting doesn't help if you've already gone through that route and you've lost or whatever the situation is. But But most of the time, I would say that the fighting is really inconvenient and really soul sucking and really hard, but it is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It is
And
worth
they
it.
do let you bring it back up into court because situations change and they evolve, and
Mm-hmm.
it requires new parameters and new rules
Mm-hmm.
and dynamics. So, in your case, it might be advantageous for you to bring it back up.
Yep, and something I see all the time is custody modification, right? They already went through the process and they're back saying this doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Something changed. So I do like that nothing is really set in stone. It's very
Mm-hmm.
movable and something that you can update. So I would certainly encourage you to go back and ask for what it is that you would like and some equal time with your kids. But I think that is all we've got time for today. And this definitely, we just scratched the surface of a really, really big topic. So I'm sure that we will address this again. Let me pull up the next topic. Um, the dilemma of leaving a toxic relationship. So we're going to talk about, we touched on a couple of weeks ago, we touched specifically on leaving a toxic relationship with children and more of the dynamics about children. This time we will talk more about the financial barriers to
Mm.
leaving and the overall fear and finances that really get in the way of leaving, even though you may want to leave. So that is what's coming up next week. You can find any of our past episodes in our Facebook group, Braveheart Conversations. You can also find us on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. So check us out there and definitely check back in next week. You can email us any questions, or if you have a suggestion, a topic suggestion you'd love, or a story to share, feel free to do that. My email is defytheaverage@gmail.com.
Marie at mariesgold.com.
So
Yeah.
definitely reach out if you've got any thoughts to share. And with that, we love you all and we hope you have an amazing week.
Be brave.
Bye bye, everybody.